and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. It's everything you need just to walk the scene. And if you wanna make it better, you give it to me, I'll grease it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop, don't let the dream drop hop. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, Ashley, I'm excited to have you on the show. You and I have very similar backgrounds and a lot of things in common. So I'm really excited to chat about all that on the show today.
Yes, me too. Honestly, it was awesome when I found you because I was like, oh my God, I relate to her so much. Like you said, we could probably chat for a whole day.
Well, and it's hilarious, right? Because as a podcaster, I get offers in my inbox like every day. People are like, hey, I think I'd be an awesome fit for your show. And you go look and you're like, no. We don't see eye to eye on things. I can see this already. Not that we have to, right? I mean, I'm always open to hearing other people's stories and their opinions and their experiences. However, there's sometimes straight up things that have nothing to do with my podcast, like jewelry, like who wants me? What?
No.
You know, and it's funny though. I always give people the time because like I myself have been in this situation where I have been like, wow, I think I would be awesome on this podcast. And I've reached out to that person and it's been amazing. Right. So, and it's fun to get on and talk with somebody else that has, you know, things they're interested in. Right. But, and so sometimes like solo podcasting, it's always fun to jump on somebody else's and talk about your stuff because your own listeners don't get that. So anyhow, when I saw your thing, I was like, oh my gosh, we could definitely go off. So let's do it.
Woo! I'm excited.
So let's kind of dive into your story a little bit because it's a lot like mine and you've got a lot of stuff, moving pieces to it.
Yeah. So like the really sped up short version, I guess you could say, like started 10 years ago. So like yourself, I do have a history in bodybuilding and bikini competitions through NPC. So getting like very lean and not really like following a healthy diet, even though we think we look super healthy. So did my share of competitions in that way. I did 4 of them. And then I was like, all right, it's time, it's done. Like I'm done here. During the time I was doing those, I was in pharmacy school. So I am a pharmacist. I did pursue like Western medicine, do the route, discovered my passion for health and fitness while in pharmacy school, thought that I'd be able to bring that with me into my practice. And then for those of you listening with pharmacy, like there's different areas for pharmacy, but I was doing what everyone knows a pharmacist to be, the retail pharmacist at like Walgreens, right? That's what I did. And just through like terrible corporate structure, there is no time to really help patients. And oh my gosh, there's not enough help. There's so much stress, super long hours. Like it's not a good time. So it was kind of like a moral burnout almost. Like I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. And so I started, helping friends. I was the friend who was always like into health and fitness. Like, can you give me a diet? Like I had seriously 8 girlfriends getting married in a year and they were like, can you help me? So I helped them. And then it was like, well, you should do this full time. And I was like, I can't do this full time. I have a job. But I kind of just sat down and I really loved it. So I started my coaching in 2018 and, I missed this whole segment, but right before then I went through my own health struggles of hypothyroidism and going through numerous doctors and tests to figure out what was wrong with me. It was like constant fatigue, burnout. Little did I know my lifestyle changes at the time were horrible, right? Like I'm sure, under eating, overtraining, massively stressed. And so it took me a long time to realize like the medication was not where it was at. Like I really needed substantial lifestyle changes. So throughout those years, I've been doing that and then starting my own coaching company to teach others how to do this and how to do it the proper way. So you don't do what I did. And then was finally able to leave pharmacy in November of 2020. And here we are. So full-time in my coaching business, now doing what I want to do and actually helping people.
I love that. So it's kind of funny because kind of like you, I mean, I already had a nutrition background before the bodybuilding. That was kind of the really bad part about my story with bodybuilding is I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was doing it anyway. So I was like, oh, I can just fix it later, but the funny thing is like everybody wanted to like started reaching out to me and they're like, can you help? But the funny thing is I realized early on in my coaching how horrible of a coach I actually probably was, because I was not looking at all of the pieces, right? I was just like, oh, work out 6 days a week, right? Nobody's trying to step on stage here. You don't need to work out 6 days a week. And I was completely overcomplicating things. So I wonder what the evolution of your coaching looked like, just because you look back at it and you're like, oh yeah, you learn so much from your own coaching experience and are able to grow from there.
For sure. I mean, I don't know if you were coaching competitors. I will never touch a competitor, but even like thinking about my own coach back then, where it was like, oh yeah, work out 6 days a week, maybe 2 times a day, eat asparagus with macadamia nut oil, right? Like all the things. And if you lose your period, don't worry, we'll work on getting it back after the show. And it's like, what? Like, wait.
Yeah. And I mean, I actually, not at the time, I was not coaching competitors. I didn't bridge into that until I had far more education. And I'm probably not a real, I would say I'm probably not a real popular contest prep coach, because I do approach it from as healthy of a standpoint as possible, which is not a popular opinion. We've still got a lot of bro coaches out there. I'm also an NPC judge, so I'm immersed in the bodybuilding industry.
That's amazing.
And so, it's kind of interesting though. There are coaches out there now. I know a ton of really good contest prep coaches that are piecing in functional medicine, which is really cool, and functional health coaching, doing some amazing things with competitors. And these competitors look top notch. And some of these people are starting to like help fix Olympia athletes and all the things. It's really awesome to see.
About time. Yes.
The industry, but like locally in my area, if somebody's not willing to work on their health, I will not coach them. So I'm not very popular as far as contest prep goes.
That's actually probably the way to be. I don't know if we're even very popular for weight loss, because we're going to make you do it the right way.
Well, isn't that the hard part though, as what you're doing? And it's something that I'm faced with every day is I hate to tout myself as a weight loss coach. I hate it, because sometimes, I mean, especially for me, I don't know about you, but most of the people I get are really metabolically broken by the time I get them. And we got a lot of work to do on the back end before we can really start worrying about the weight loss portion. And that's so hard, right? Because if you have 6 months worth of metabolic work you have to do in order to optimize this person, they may not lose weight. They're going to get frustrated. And so I put that out on the table right away. I'm like, listen, health is my number one priority. And along with that comes weight loss.
100%. Honestly, you just nailed 90 to 95% of the women we work with. And that's kind of why we're transitioning into this like metabolic restoration coaching service, because it's just so common and prominent right now that like, if you come to me eating 1,200 calories, I'm not putting you into a further deficit. There ain't no way. So 6 months at least is what you're going to need to restore that metabolism again. So I appreciate you also do the same.
I love that. So tell me a little bit about what you have going on and what you have learned in the process of all of this, because it's a really important piece of this puzzle.
Oh my goodness. So what you said about like transitioning your own coaching and what you've learned. So, I mean, we've all started somewhere, right? Like I used to work with clients for free and then like $40 a month and just like little, and then you build up. And the best, like you can have a ton of certifications, you really can, but I do think that the best experience and knowledge comes from working with clients, right? Working with them directly. So, originally it was like somewhat tailored meal plans. And I was like, I hate meal plans. And plus not being a dietitian or a nutritionist, like you can't really do meal plans. I love macros. Like I love the data with tracking macronutrients, and just like what I have found is that the normal like bread and butter client you think you're going to have, like, let's exercise more, let's lose, let's go in a calorie deficit, is not the norm anymore. And it's kind of like all of these complexities are coming out. Most women now have PCOS, hypothyroid, such as us. And they're not being taught what to do from their doctors. They go to their doctors don't even run the right blood tests. They slam them on medication right away. They give them zero dietary advice, or if they do give them advice, it's cut out all carbs, drop to 1,200 calories to lose weight. And it's like, oh my goodness. So it's kind of like, I found that you have to really help people unlearn what they have been taught this entire time, whether they're 20, 30, or 40, even older. What we've been taught is not really correct. So there definitely needs to be that functional gap, like you're saying, in medicine. And that's where we're hoping to like bridge that gap.
Right.
Just so much misinformation.
Right. And that's the thing, right? But people have been trained like, so, I guess a lady that I work with, she calls doctors one of those cultural editors in our life, right? And I love that saying, because the cultural editor, we have been conditioned and taught that the doctors know. And we have that in our head from a very young age. We go to the doctor for our shots when we're little kids. We go to the doctor if we have a sniffle. We go for allergies. Like, this person says what we need to do and dictates our health and lifestyle choices, even if they may not be qualified to do so.
Right. And as a doctor, like, even though I'm a doctor of pharmacology, like technically that's my surname, like I've been in the space. So I definitely know that, like, it's not even the doctors who are at fault. It is conditioning of medicine and health and what we've thought we've known up until now. Even in pharmacy school, you learn like the DASH diet and certain diets for high blood pressure and whatever. You don't really learn nutrition. You don't learn how things are supposed to go. And doctors really don't either. Like, you learn the Krebs cycle and things like that, right? Like you learn glucose metabolism and whatever, but you're not really taught how diseases and illnesses are part of a core. Instead, you're taught of like, oh, they have this symptom, here's a medication for it, this is what you give, here's the protocol. And so they only know what they know. So unless you have a doctor who has gone through it themselves or is super interested in pursuing the more like woo-woo, right? Like functional medicine is almost woo-woo kind of lifestyle changes and stress and diet. Like it's almost not even their fault. So I kind of feel bad that, they are getting such a bad rap, but like now more science and data is coming out. This is what needs to change. This is what makes the biggest difference. These are the biggest needle movers. And if you're not going to adapt that way, like old Western doctors and practices are going to be left like in the dust. You really are.
Absolutely.
So yeah, trying to teach patients that like, all right, just because your doctor said so, like, to be honest, I corrected so many doctors' mistakes as a pharmacist. Like nobody's perfect. Everyone's human, right? So
absolutely. So macros. I love this. I have experimented with all facets of dieting pretty much. I have done macros. I have done, actually, my origination with diet was the GAPS diet, which was incredible. And there's like a lot of these modalities you can use to restore people's health. There's a lot of these modalities you can use to restore metabolism, weight loss. Macros are one of them. Now, macros, there are multiple different ways to macro diet. Okay. And this is where I think sometimes people miss the bill because they get so obsessed with those three numbers, proteins, carbs, and fats, that they tend to misunderstand the rest of the puzzle. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. And I love how you said there's different ways to macro diet, because macros can be used on any diet. You could be keto and track macros, right? But your just macro differences will obviously be different percentages. So we use macros. It's a tool, right? It's a tool to track your nutrition, track your intake, see exactly what you're eating, see where you need to go, see how those changes are affecting your biofeedback, and then adjusting as necessary. So macros, I do not consider a diet. I consider it a tool, just like you would track your finances, you are tracking your energy intake, right? So with that said, we use that because it is a data, like sure point visual way to get clients from here to here in their calorie amounts, because most clients will need a reverse diet, right? And it's very hard to just be like, add more food here. And it's easier to kind of like track it. So with that said, I also love using it because it brings awareness to how much nutrition is actually in certain foods. So for example, most people think what peanut butter is a protein, like it's a protein source. It's a fat source with protein, right? And so I can't tell you how many clients are like, I had no idea how many carbs were in potatoes or not in potato, like versus rice or whatever. So it brings awareness to that. It brings awareness to your portion sizes and what you're eating. And I think it's a gradual first step in learning about all of this so that eventually you can intuitively eat and do what you need to do. But with that said, certain patients will need, or clients will need, protocols based on gut health, based on thyroid issues, PCOS, things like that. So you can tailor it to each individual client's needs, and it gives them something to learn. So
right. And I love that you brought that up, the peanut butter thing. I swear that's on every intake form I do. People list peanut butter as a protein source. And this is where all macros are not created equal, because a lot of people, and this is where people get stuck in this trap, and it takes a little bit more education, is not all proteins are the kind of proteins we need to be eating. So like peanut butter, for example, yes, it does have protein in it. However, it is lacking multiple essential amino acids. So really, is it getting you where you need to be as far as a protein standpoint goes? Maybe not. So that's all things, which I saw you had like a vegan coaching certification as well.
The plant-based.
Oh yeah, the plant-based one. That's super interesting stuff. And I applaud you on that, because it is very, very difficult to make sure that people are getting not only the essential amino acids in a plant-based diet, but also the nutrients they need. So that's a really hard one, because a lot of the plant-based coaches out there, they have to be able to figure out, are we getting the right essential amino acids in order to make up the proper protein content? Are we able to get our B vitamins in there? Like all the things, right?
So no, of course. And I want to like point out that I am not plant-based myself, and we are not like a plant-based company. Like I definitely eat a ton of meat.
Yes.
And plant-based doesn't mean that you're necessarily giving up meat products either. It's more along the lines of like you said, getting educated on pairing amino acids together. Like rice and beans is the perfect complement for getting all of those amino acids. Separately, they're not. The proteins in them are not, but together they work well. So it's kind of learning that for clients, and then also just putting an emphasis on micronutrients as well as the macros. So it's all fun, right? Science is fun.
Absolutely. And I do agree with you on all of that. I am by far not I'm not a huge fan of a plant-based diet, but I love that as a coach, you learned more and became more educated about that, because there are people out there. Unfortunately, I won't coach them because I do not have the skills, tools, time, or really energy, honestly, to do plant-based coaching. However, it's really hard to get them what they need, but they have these particular goals or religious beliefs or whatever it may be that revolve around it. And so I'm glad that you're out there trying to make sure that they're at least getting the nutrition that they need.
Trying. And I don't know, you're just a coach yourself, right? Are you a one-man team? Okay.
One-man team.
I was a one-man team for a while. I brought on 2 coaches under me, and one of them is actually like very, very good with vegan and vegetarian clients, because she used to be one. So where I slack, I have a coach who may pick up, right?
I love that. That's great. Wonderful team stuff there. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk about the macronutrients and why they're important and why they're not just a number.
So they are not just a number. And what I like to kind of elaborate it on, and why when people are like, why do I need to track? Why macros, whatever. It's like, everyone's heard of calorie counting, right? Like we've all counted maybe calories back in the day. If I tell you to eat 1,500 calories, you can fill that up with whatever, right? Doesn't matter. Most people, general population, is going to fill that 1,500 calories up with carbs and fat. It is what it is. That's what we see all the time. So by breaking that 1,500 calories into macros instead, we're going to make sure that you're getting adequate protein for, preserving lean muscle, building lean muscle, just general body functions, enough fat, especially for females, for hormone health, and then enough carbs based on what you also need. So for us, macros aren't just a number. Like if I were to tailor macronutrients for you and I having thyroid issues, like we do need to make sure we're eating a substantial amount of carbs, because glucose is super important in the conversion of thyroid hormones. So you have to take this stuff into account when you are making someone's plan. And it's not like we're just throwing out numbers for you and like, here you go, let's, we'll try and see if this works. I just kind of made it up. which you'll see from a lot of macro calculators. So if you go online, you can find a bajillion macro calculators. Exactly. And they're all different. I did 8 of them one day and they were all different. So it's really helpful to have someone who knows what they're talking about actually.
And that macro calculator has no clue as to what's going on with your metabolic health. Like, how is your thyroid? How's all this stuff? Where's your cortisol levels? Where's your fasted insulin at? Like, that thing doesn't know jack about what your underlying health is. So it always cracks me up, because what do those say 9 times out of 10 if you're a female? 1,400 calories. Maybe 12.
My FitnessPal is famous for 1,200. Like, it's always 1,200 on my FitnessPal.
Hi.
Yeah. So it's don't use calculators. Is that like the premise of this plan?
Right. So getting into the macros, so protein, obviously we are mostly lack of that when we are calorie counting. Why would that make a difference in our dieting success or not success?
So, I mean, protein is like so essential to everyone. Thinks protein is like bodybuilder status, like, oh, protein, I need protein shakes. And like, coming from I mean, you're probably more of a bodybuilder than I am. Bikini's like, I don't know what category you did, but
I was a figure competitor.
Okay. So you were obviously much more into the flexing and posing, and I kind of wish I could have built that muscle for that, but that's what they think of when they think of protein, or they think of men, and protein is so essential to so many different parts of our makeup, right? Like enzyme activity, every enzyme we have going on in the body, antibodies for our immune system, hair, nails, like every woman wants long hair and shiny hair and perfect longer nails. And we don't really focus on getting enough protein to do all these things. And so amino acids are just super important in that way, in tissues and all muscle like repair and restoration in tissues. I'm like flying off. I'm like losing my train of thought. But it's just one of those underrated macros. It also is like the highest thermogenic effect when we eat it. So we're like burning the most calories when we eat it. It's just very underrated for bone health, for everything. And I think bringing an awareness to that is super important. And no, it's not like some calculators will even tell you like you need 200 grams of protein. And I think that's just ridiculous too.
Well, so the interesting thing about protein is there's actually a lot of clinical research, and I can't cite the study off of the top of my head, but there's multiple studies out there that actually show you physically cannot gain weight off of eating just protein alone, right? It's the other things that come with it. It is the carbohydrates or the fat. Protein, I mean, obviously you can overdo it, people, so don't misconstrue this. You can overdo protein because at one point your body cannot process it all, and it spills over into what you see on your labs as your blood urea nitrogen levels. That is the waste product of protein. However, people, if they begin to fill their diet alone with more protein, oftentimes they are less hungry, right? And their blood sugar is actually more stable. And then you brought up the thermogenic part of it. So I like all of that.
Yeah. Blood sugar stabilization is another big one. And I think that's where, like when I was telling you about leaving pharmacy and why I did that, it's because I would love to make recommendations for people on, diabetic type of things and blood sugar control and insulin resistance. And it was like, you don't have that option in that time. And it's like, everyone wants to get rid of carbs immediately. And it's like, we don't need to do that. We just need to focus on maybe fiber and then pairing those carbs with a protein and a fat and getting more of a stable blood sugar response. So protein is super key, like you said, for that.
Absolutely. And it's funny. So I have experimented with everything. And so I'm probably a little bit different in a different camp than you as far as like eliminating carbs. There can be places that they are actually beneficial. I actually spent a full solid year in ketosis as an endurance cyclist. Yes.
How did that go? Because I tried keto and my body hated it.
It was incredible. The best thing I'm not a ketogenic athlete by any means, or even low carb at all right now. However, I do have to say it was one of the best things I ever did for my diet and my health, and not to mention the learning process in amongst it. I discovered all sorts of really incredible things. So there is a place that it can happen, but here's the thing. people oftentimes will have insulin resistance, or they have terribly out of control blood sugar, high fasted insulin levels. And what do? They jump to that low carb diet or that ketogenic diet, but no amount of low carb or ketogenic diet is going to help if you have stress or other things that are impacting your blood glucose levels. So
that's the key word, is stress.
Yes.
Stress.
So anyhow, I think that there are places, I think now keto has gotten blown way out of proportion, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. There are some qualities to a low carb diet in situations or certain individuals that can be really awesome. But most of the time people are approaching it from the wrong angle. And then what happens, right? They approach it from the wrong angle, and then they gain a ton of weight even after they've had a little bit of success, because it was approached from the wrong angle in the beginning.
Right. And I think that's because, again, lack of information and kind of, even if you're in a ketogenic diet, you can still be eating in a calorie surplus. Fat is super dense. And then, to be honest, most people do it for the weight loss effects, right? Not the health benefits that you were potentially doing it for. And it's not sustainable. If you can't give up carbs forever or stay in ketosis forever, you're gonna put that water weight back on when you start eating carbs, right?
Right. Then plus even more than just water weight, because what happens is when you have a restrictive mindset, and this is a whole nother piece of it, as you know, for some people, it is a restriction. It is a diet. It's not just something that they do for their health. And so the mental space revolving around that, whether it be keto or whatever you name it, macro counting, it can be with anything, right? But if you have that restricted mindset, then when you come off of it, you have a tendency to go a little bit crazy with your food choices. It's that cycle, right? That roller coaster you're riding. And then next thing you know, you've gained so much more weight because of the restriction is gone. And now all of a sudden it's like party time.
Yep. That all or nothing mindset will get you.
Yeah. So there's so many facets of dieting or nutrition that are much related to our mental and spiritual health and our stress in our life, far beyond food.
That's why I said you hit the nail on the head when you said stress. And that's why, like, taking functional medicine and holistic nutrition and holistic health is what is important, because especially for females, like, we are our hormone health is very, very influenced by stress. And so you think of stress, or normal people think of stress as like relationships, job, life, kids, like that kind of stuff, right? But you never really also take into account stress from exercise, stress from under eating, putting your body in these chronically stressed states with cortisol. That's why you mentioned, like, what's your cortisol level? And it's like, oh my God, I can't even imagine some of them.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I actually have a client currently. She started off with 75 hard, and that's a whole new rabbit hole there.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. Started off with 75 hard and was doing all of this restriction and all of this hardcore exercising twice a day. I've seen this. I mean, people take that way out of proportion, but, and this started in August. She signed up with me maybe, probably about 6 weeks ago now. And she's like, well, I've been working out since August and I don't even see a difference. And now we've had to reverse diet and do all the things. Her GI health from all of the home stress and the exercise stress and the nutrition part of it was a huge mess. So yes, she lost weight on 75 hard. However, she ended up with all these other metabolic ramifications, including adding extra exercise stress to her already major stressful life. And so now she's like, I've been working out since August and I don't even have any muscle. And I was like, well, okay, our muscle it's expensive, right? Our muscle needs calories in order to grow. And our body is not going to take more money out of our checking account and actually try to make it work if it doesn't have the means to make it bigger, on the other side. So I was trying to explain that the reason she hasn't gotten where she has is because stress, lack of eating, that initial part of her diet was probably done incorrectly, or we know done incorrectly. And so now it's going to take a little more time than that. And anytime you start on any kind of health journey, you're not immediately going to build a ton of muscle. Muscle is actually really hard to build. So that's the other thing.
Unless you're like a newbie, right?
Yeah.
Like the newbie gains.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said too is super important, because most people assume that weight loss means fat loss. And that's not really what's happening in all cases, right? So weight loss, when you're losing general weight in a calorie deficit, you may also be losing muscle mass. Like that may happen. So it's not all going to be body fat that you lose. And so if you're constantly in a calorie deficit, like your body's just doing its best. It's doing its best.
Absolutely. And you and I can probably dive down that rabbit hole a little bit, because this is one thing that's big with bodybuilding, right? Women now, all of a sudden, bodybuilding has gotten really popular because of social media and stuff. Everybody wants to be a bikini competitor, or they're going to go through this diet. It's going to make them reach their goals if they decide to sign up to step on stage. But here's the thing. When you go into a fat loss phase, especially prepping for the extreme of the extreme, which is a bodybuilding show, you also lose muscle. You do. And muscle is heavy, and muscle is metabolically expensive. So if you're dieting, your body's going to ditch it fast. And you will see these girls that end up landing on stage. They didn't have a lot of muscle to spend in the first place. Then they get over dieted by somebody and they turn into a skeleton. Well,
that was my first show. I look at those pictures and I'm like, why did I even go on stage?
Exactly. So you could shine a little light on that, I'm sure, because you have to be able to have enough muscle to spend in order to go through a bodybuilding cut. And that was always the thing, right? Why you spend so much time in the off season trying to make, gains, why you don't just step on stage every couple of months and stay stage lean, because there has to be an improvement season there.
Right. And I think even if you're not a bodybuilder, I think that's what most people miss is like, not your whole diet is not a cut. Like your whole life is not a cut. You need improvement stages or maintenance, right? In normal life. So like as a competitor myself, you described me, like I grew up an athlete and I was like, oh, I'll just, I finally got into a weight training split. I got into eating correctly, but I was tiny. Like I'm 5'5" and I stepped on stage at 108 pounds. Like I was little. I was like, my face was little. Granted, that was when the sport was new too. So, and the show I think was smaller. So I ended up winning, which like got me addicted to it a little. But then as you progress into years, like I didn't do an improvement season. So I was still trying to maintain like that 8-pack that you have when you go on stage, because I was like, oh my God, I'm a size 0. I'm so tiny. I have like this, like, I never thought I'd have abs. And I never went through an improvement season. So when I got back on stage again, and then again, like I did not look much different. I did gain a little bit more through just normal life, but it was so important that you let your body like go through the healing stage, like for hormones, for metabolic health, for muscle growth, like you said. Muscle's super hard to put on. And I know a lot of women think like, I'm going to look bulky when I work out. Like I'm trying to look bulky and it doesn't work.
I say this all the time. I honestly, I can say I have started powerlifting. I've gotten all my hormones, all my stuff in check for my last shows. Took me about 3 years. When people talk about metabolic repair, they think it's going to happen overnight. No way. I have been improving myself for 3 years. I look better than I've ever looked my whole life. Do I look like I belong on the magazine of Her or whatever it is, Shape? I don't know. No, I do not, because that's not realistic. That's not what we walk around and look like. But I am the strongest. I am the leanest. I feel amazing eating pizza on the weekends, doing things that that is balance. And I hate to tout that word balance, because you can only balance so long before you fall over. But I do think that I can enjoy my family. If my friends want to go out to dinner somewhere, I do that. Do I try to make good choices when I do that? Yeah. I mean, I got a couple things that I try to stick with that are my non-negotiables, right? but I'm healthy, I'm happy, I have zero food issues, right? And I think that's what we all need to have as our end goal. When you find health and you find that place where you can enjoy things, but you're also trying to pick up quality nutrition and do what it takes to sustain your actual body and your actual health, that is really important.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And unfortunately, like, I had to learn it the hard way. Like, I had to learn what balance was the hard way. And after doing so many shows and trying to maintain that level of leanness, which is not maintainable, like, you can't walk around like that. It just threw my adrenals into like the shitter, sorry, like,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. And then my thyroid was all off, my insulin was all off, my sex hormones were all off. So like, it was bad. And so without having to, like, what is it? Orthorexia, like the eating disorder where you just become hyper focused on, you can't have, like, I was convinced I could only have protein at bedtime, like near bedtime, because I would gain weight if I had carbs or fat, right? Like, it just became this unhealthy mindset of being so glued on what I thought was healthy. And it was actually, I was probably the unhealthiest I've ever been back when I looked the part, right? And so you have to spend those years like getting your gut back in alignment, which is what a lot of people miss, is gut health. Getting your stress under control, getting, medications aside. Like, I don't know about you, but I am on thyroid meds, and unfortunately it's like super hard to get off of them once you're on them. And it's like, if I would have known certain things back then on how to correct that, maybe it would have been way different. So trying to learn those behaviors and habits now and come to terms with the fact that, like, you don't walk around with like six pack and shredded forever. Like, a real healthy person has, healthy labs, but also, I don't know, like, you don't have to walk around veiny all day.
Right. No. And that doesn't happen. And people say, oh, well, what, somebody brought it up on the podcast yesterday that I was on as a guest. They were like, oh, well, what about so-and-so? They're like this all the time. I said, but here's what you have to keep in mind. This person has also been diagnosed with Graves' disease. Like, they have something, an autoimmune. So there's already a red flag that their body's under distress. Also, you have to figure this person is being paid to look a certain way. It is their job to look a certain way, right? And we all may have unhealthy aspects of our job. I know I used to be in dentistry. It was very unhealthy job for me. Very stressful, very fast paced, very long hours. The job itself was killing me, right? So our jobs all not now, I have a great job, but for a majority of people right now, their job actually may be something that is extremely unhealthy for them, not unlike this person that stays stage lean year round, because that's how they make their money.
No,
doesn't
doesn't
mean their labs look good. Doesn't mean they feel great, right? They can put off that I feel like $1 million any day on social media or YouTube or whatever it may be.
I see some of the Olympic athletes and I'm like, are you taking time off? Like, how, like, what does your metabolism look like? Like, how, I do have those questions and wish I knew more, but for general health, it does not need to be like crash dieting. It does not need to be working out 6 or 7 days a week. It does not need to be supplementation like crazy. Like, that's what most people go for too right away, right? Is supplements and fat burners and whatever. It doesn't need to be that way.
Don't even get me started on the fat burners. That's so awful. It's so awful. And what's the first thing they want to give you when you walk into a supplement store and say you want to lose weight? Fat burners. And these people,
like the newest one.
And majority of them are women whose adrenals are already so in the shitter. And then they're like, let's throw like ephedrine, which is not legal, but there's still that in a lot of these supplements. Like, let's throw ephedrine and, I'm drawing a total blank here, but you know what I'm saying? There's a whole bunch of fat burners that are they're big time stimulants, and they are so bad for your adrenal health. It's already and cortisol that's already in the shitter.
I hate fat burners. I hate them. I used to be one who took them too all the time. Like in college, I'm like, I need to lose weight for spring break. Let me go to GNC or something like that. Right.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about metabolic adaptation. We've kind of in this area anyways. So let's dive down this rabbit hole.
I love this rabbit hole. Well, you said yourself, like, you see a lot of your clients who come to you who have it, right? Who are going through it. And I think what's interesting too is that most people assume it means that their metabolism's broken. And really it's like, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So I don't know if your listeners are, do you use the word metabolic adaptation a lot? Like would they know?
Pretty frequently. Yeah. You can go ahead and revisit exactly what it is. Oh, that's totally fine.
Well, I mean, it's literally like it sounds like your metabolism has adapted to a lower energy intake, a lower calorie intake so that it can keep you alive, right? For survival. So if you're, total daily, what you're supposed to be eating every day for maintenance is 2,200 calories, but you've been eating at like 1,400 forever, your body is going to shift down to make the most of the calories that you are making. So everything kind of slows down. And that's where I get a lot of prospective clients who I speak to on the phone who are like, my metabolism's not what it used to be, or it's like a turtle now, I'm over 30 or whatever. And I'm like, listen, like, I hear you. I used to be you, but I'm also like over 30 now and eating 2,400 calories a day. And like, it's possible to get your calories back up. And they're like, oh my God, how? No, there's no way. I'd never be able to do that. And I was like, it's only slow because you've been chronically under eating for probably a decade. So how do we reverse that now? So I just always want to point out, like, it does not mean anything's wrong with your body. It's actually working perfectly. Like that's what's supposed to happen.
Right. It wants to make sure that it has the tools that it needs to continue to run. And an extreme case of this you would see is like hypothalamic amenorrhea, where women lose their menstrual cycle, and it may be from over exercise, it may be from under eating, it may be from chronic stress. These are all common things, right, that happen because your body, it costs it money, i.e. calories, if you want to call it that, to run. And if it does not have what it needs, it's going to start ditching processes in order to keep up with the demand that it has. So this can actually even look like your NEAT activity, So like, I talk with my hands a lot and I'm flipping my hands around. Well, when I was in the end stages of contest prep, my brain knew it did not want to waste any more calories than it had to by me moving around unnecessarily. So what did it do? It started down regulating everything. I didn't talk with my hands as much. I didn't move as fast. And you don't think about these things until you actually start really thinking about them. And you're like, oh my gosh, did this actually happen? So our body is smart and it will conserve its energy by all means necessary, which even includes where you're at and where I was at, conversion of thyroid hormones.
I was going to say your memory like brought up one of my own, like when I was getting ready for a contest or close to a show, I wouldn't even want to speak. I would like text people in the same house because I just did not have the energy for conversation. And now, like eating so much, like I've been spinning in my chair on this call. Like I notice I fidget way more because you're right. Like your energy, your NEAT goes up. But I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't register either is, like you said, you lose your period, your hormones start to downregulate because it's trying to simply like keep you alive and keep your processes going. And when that happens, it is not focused on procreation. It is not focused on wanting to have a baby because it can't even you can't even sustain your own self right now. We are not going to grow another human. So it shuts down that process. And that's where we have a lot of situations that we're running into now with women, with fertility and stress and missed periods and all of that. So
absolutely. So I love all of this. What's another thing that you want to talk about that is something that you've learned in the process of all of your coaching?
Something I have learned, oh my goodness. Well, aside from what we already touched on of like it being a huge mental component, unlearning those things and kind of having the guidance through this is why I think having a coach is so important to go through some of these processes, is because it's going to be hard. It's going to be like the opposite of what you think you're supposed to do, like to lose weight, to eat more. You're like, what? That doesn't compute. Like it's going to be uncomfortable. And so I've learned that you have to really be able to get through the uncomfortable mental shifts that are going to happen. And that's something that is really prominent. Like I mostly work with women, so we see it a lot in our coaching industry. And it's something that I've wanted to take a deeper focus on and route, because if I can tell you, and we can talk about all the things to do and set up all your protocols, but if you're going to be very scared and not trust the process and just like kind of like hold yourself back in that regard mentally, it's, you know, we have to assess those blocks first. And then the mental shifts also, like the growth mindset also kind of helps discipline and self-confidence too. So it's just way more of a mental game than some people think, than a physical one.
I love that. Well, so if there's one thing you wanted to get out there to my audience today, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. Well,
it's hard to narrow it down.
I know. I'm like, do I, you know, my general sign off, because we didn't even talk about it on this, but I like purely believe that everyone is dehydrated. So I usually always say like, drink a ton of water, like just please drink water. That's always been like my fun little sign off. So we might as well just keep it, but also like stop eliminating entire food groups. Your metabolism will thank you.
I love that. I love that. Well, if people want to find you and look more into what you're doing, how do they go about doing that?
You can find me on Instagram at dr.dwyer, so DWYER. Our webpage is teambdncoaching.com. We also have an Instagram page, TeamBDN Coaching, and I would love to like talk to all of you guys more and talk to you more. This has been awesome. I feel like I could go all day.
Yeah, no worries. This is great. Maybe we'll have to revisit it again later on down the road.
I feel like there's competition, there's thyroid, there's macros, there's metabolism.
You can go everywhere. It's funny how that works, but I love it. Well, I will put all your information in the show notes so people can reach out to you, learn more about you. You have a podcast too, right?
Oh, I do. And that's something like, I was like, I need to start doing that again. It's called Health Unscripted with Dr. Dwyer. So Health Unscripted, little pharmacy pun there on Apple and Spotify. I do need to get back into recording. I took a long hiatus.
Gotcha. I get it. I had to do a little bit of that this winter as well. So understandably so, podcasts are a lot of work. So
yeah.
I certainly appreciate you joining us. I hope people will check out your podcast. I'll put all of your information in the show notes.
Yay. Well, thank you. It was so fun being on here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.